Welcome to Leaving Nothing to Chance, your go-to podcast where we bring you insights from some of the most influential voices in small business and personal development. Each week, we dive deep into conversations with top thought leaders, authors, and business moguls from around the world, sharing their secrets to success and strategies for growth. Tune in for exclusive content that will inspire, motivate, and equip you to take your journey to the next level. This is Leaving Nothing to Chance.
Welcome, everybody. John Solleder here with a long-term friend of mine, Mr. Mark Helsel, all the way from Altoona, Pennsylvania.
That's right. That's right. Rainy central Pennsylvania today.
Oh, it's raining. It's the Penn State country.
I'm 30 minutes down the road. You need to come visit me. Stay at my house here and we can go hang out with Cale Sanderson.
Nothing would make me happier. Cal Sanderson, one of the greatest coaches, wrestlers, and human beings, by the way. I told you I met Cal years ago, and my daughter, who's now 30, believe it or not, Mark, a little bit.
Yeah.
We were looking for a pen to get the tickets for it was the All-Star wrestling meet prior to the season, and it was here in Dallas. And Cale, all the other guys were looking at each other. Nobody had a pen, including me. I should have had a pen, right? But nobody had a pen. And Cale said, "Hold on, kid." Went through his personal stuff, rummaged through his bag, wrestling sneakers, all kinds of stuff, and all of a sudden found a pen. So she got Cale, Kenny Monday, Kevin Jackson. There's 4 Olympic championships and God knows how many NCAA titles between that bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And still got that ticket, by the way. Still got it.
You better. He's truly a legend.
Great mentor of young men, more importantly, because wrestling's a short-term thing, but life is long after. And by the way, that's something that you're doing. I noticed some things yesterday we'll get into on this show about some of the young men that you have mentored over the years, that some have gone on to big things in the sport of baseball. Most athletes, even if you do go on, there's an expiration date and you got to do other things with your life. And so we'll get into all of that, Mark, but let's just start out. Coach Mark, Division I baseball, you played at Mercer U in beautiful Macon, Georgia. And how was that as a Yankee being down there in Georgia?
That was interesting. Even how I got there was crazy. I was playing in a high school game, and the opposing coach, a guy named Larry McCabe, who I've come to know and love over the years, he says to me in about the 3rd inning of a game, "Hey, how'd you like to play in the South?" And I'm like, coaches aren't usually talking to you during the game. And I'm like, "Put me on the bus, coach. I'd love to play in the South." I had no idea. I never even heard of a Mercer University. And he made a phone call. Coach came up, watched me play. Next thing I know, my brother's driving me 900 miles south to Macon, Georgia. I get down there. You know, unlike today where kids are actually getting paid to go visit schools, I drove down there and I'm like, okay, here it is. I'd never seen it. This is my new home. And it was interesting because the South, even to this day, is different than the North. But I think even back then it was a little more different, and the culture. And then I met my teammates and they all made fun of me because I sounded like a Yankee. And of course I made fun of them because they sounded like Southerners. So it was a cultural experience for me. But yeah, I had a great career there. I had a great head coach. I was a 4-year starter. Barry Myers at the time was the all-time winningest college coach. Great memories from my college days.
And you received a degree in interpersonal communications.
It was the only thing, John, that I could imagine doing because I was not that studious, I'm sorry to say. I tried accounting, I tried math, I tried history. I was just not good at any of them. But the one thing I always thought was, hey, if I can communicate, I'll probably go into sales. That probably would help me. So I took all these communication classes, public speaking, drama, and lo and behold, what happened after college? I ended up in sales and it helped.
I can relate. I did the same thing. I was saying to my oldest sister this morning, we were talking, and I said, her and I were both really good students, but neither one of us ever had to crack a book until my senior year last semester. calculus 1 and calculus 2. I'm like, I'm going to be a sports writer. What are you, calculus? What am I going to need calculus for? I had to take it and I had to pass it because I couldn't graduate without these two big math credits. And I'm like, to this day, I'm like, don't ask me anything about calculus because I couldn't tell you a thing about
Yeah.
it.
No.
It's interesting. But anyway, so Mark, let's talk about you and I met through the direct selling industry many years ago.
Yes, we did.
Company that was ahead of its time, by the way, for my direct selling friends. Mark's not in the direct selling field anymore because you're all really in the direct selling field, but the direct selling network marketing industry. But Mark was the co-creator of a concept of getting retail customers.
Mm-hmm.
And you and your partner, you guys were smart. You tapped into a local university, Penn State, right down the road from you there.
Yeah.
Some of the young people that were studying IT. This was 20 years ago, I want to say?
Oh, it was more than that. More than that. I was at the time, I think I was maybe 30. I'm 62. That's 32 years, John. You're going way back. You're dusting off the history books for me. But yeah, those were great days. My entrepreneurial career has been a lot of different twists and turns, but those are good memories.
But you were ahead of your time in two things, Mark. And I remember us having this conversation in Montreal. You came up to help us with our company, which I'm still glad to say still in business, 29 years.
Still using the product.
Sat there and had a great conversation looking at the lake, I think, there at whatever that hotel, I can't remember the name of it is.
Yeah.
And two things came up. One is that the direct selling industry eventually would become very heavily focused on retail and the necessity of distributors to have real retail businesses, even if they're great recruiters. And you were absolutely right. And secondly, using technology, at a time where most people, it was like, hey, if you could email, I don't even think Facebook was really around when we started.
We were getting stacks of papers. You remember, you buy leads, they'd send them to you in the mail. That was maddening. So yeah, it was right when databases started really becoming possible, and leads are an important part of growing a business. And yeah, I thought, well, we should find people that actually want to try the product that we're selling, and let's do it in a way that it's not a stack of papers, but let's go online and find these leads in the online database and select them based on criteria. It sounds like nothing, right? But it didn't exist back then. And I had these smart young developers that the idea was good, but without them, the idea is probably still an idea. But they brought it to life. We called it Lead Pick, and it worked. It was massively successful.
We certainly used it, and some of my friends and your friends in the industry did, and you were ahead of your time. But then you decided to get into your real sweet spot and your passion back into baseball as your sons were growing up. So we'll talk about them a little bit also. But I want to talk about mentorship for a minute. You had a gentleman named Rob Bruno mentored you. What are some of the things, number one, that Rob taught you? And second to that, how important are mentors for our listeners?
Great question. I almost have to tell the story of even how I met Rob Bruno to tell you about his mentorship. We were at Arizona State. I used to take my son Christian out there, spring training in Arizona. And Christian says, Dad, I think that's NorCal over there. I didn't know who NorCal was. I said, who's NorCal? He goes, oh, it's one of the top travel baseball programs in the country. And I go, I'm a networker. So I go, let's go meet them. Of course, he thought that was a stupid idea. But we walked over and there's this big guy there and he's having a good time. And I said, you guys must be NorCal. And he goes, we are, and you must be. And he puts his hand out and we meet, and that's Rob Bruno. And we have this nice conversation. And he invites me out the next day to watch them play. They had the number 2 ranked 14U baseball team in the country, happened to be in town. My son was 14. This is a crazy story, but it leads to the mentorship. And he says, come on out. We go out and he sees Christian and he says, Christian, you're not on vacation. Grab a bat and get in here and hit with us. So picture this, John. The night before, I don't know the guy. The next day, my son's hitting in the batting cage with the number 2 ranked team in the country with a guy that we don't know at all. And then he comes over to me afterwards and said, hey, your son's pretty good. How would he like to play for us this summer? I mean, this is how this guy operates. And my son ended up playing for him. He took him completely under his wing. And then I started learning how this whole thing of getting scholarships worked. When we played for them, this guy was on the phone constantly talking to college coaches. I'd be trying to ask him a question. He'd be saying, hold on, Mark, UCLA coach is on the phone. I got to talk to him. Hold on. And then I'd talk to him for 3 minutes and he'd say, hold on, this is the Washington State coach calling me. And I just watched this thing unfold and I'm like, I'm latching on to this guy. He is the man. And he mentored me for many years. That's how I met him. And he just shared so much information with me.
And then out of that, in 2011, you started NorCal East, which is an extension program of that Cal program in the Northeastern United States. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah, we were in Georgia playing, and I was with his team, and I said, Rob, I got an idea. I got to bounce off you. And I had no idea if this would fly. He had one of the most successful programs in the country in Pleasanton, California. I said, I would like us to become NorCal East, and we'll be on the East Coast and you'll be on the West Coast. Now, remember, I was a nobody, right? This is just an idea. Guess what Rob says? Great idea. We can help more kids. I love it. And that's how we became NorCal East. And again, he oversaw the whole program, making sure I wasn't making stupid mistakes. And we became pretty successful.
And in 2014, you decided to go independent. Why'd you make that decision and how has that turned out today?
So probably has more to do with just me as a person. I'm an independent person. I have so many ideas. I was not a very good employee, John. I had too many creative ideas and I kept running up against early in my career, oh, that's not the way we do things. And it wasn't really the case with Rob, but I was just ready. He had gotten me to a point. It's like when a college coach is an assistant and then he gets a head coach opportunity and it's time to fly. And it was my time to fly. I had the foundation and I said to Rob, I said, I really want to just build my own organization. And he was all for that. He was very supportive of that. And I started making my own decisions and things happened pretty well for us.
And are you still in contact with him?
Oh yeah, 100%. He's a friend for life.
And how important was not only his mentorship, but how important is it for people to find a mentor that can guide them in what they want to do, kind of like Rob did with yourself?
Yeah, it's paramount. I look back at that, but I don't really believe in coincidences, John. I don't think you do either. Fate, destiny, God's will for our lives. But I think back how I met him and then what a role he played, not just in my life, but in my son Christian's life, who played in the SEC in baseball as a result of Rob helping us. How important is a mentor? This is not dramatic. It's life-changing. To be a mentor or to have a mentor is life-changing for both parties.
And let's talk a little bit about uncommon standards, because on your website, I picked up yesterday about uncommon standards. Give everybody an idea what that is.
You and I have been talking about mediocrity is our enemy. Zig Ziglar says there's wandering generalities and there's meaningful specifics. There's so many ways of putting it. And I started thinking about common. What's common? Who wants to be common? Let's set standards that are absolutely uncommon. And all of a sudden you start sharing these concepts with people and they start buying in. And pretty soon you've got a culture of people that want to embrace being different in a good way. Not in a bad way, not bringing attention to yourself in a bad way, but in a good way. So let me give you a couple of things that we would do that we would call uncommon standards. First of all, we all like energy. So I used to teach our teams and our coaches and our parents, we're going to be high energy. So when we take the field, we sprint on the field, we sprint off the field. When we get walked, we had times, 5 seconds down to first base. If we hit a pop-up in the infield, most people, they just lazily jog. Nope, we're flying around the bases. So everything we were doing with energy. Then I started talking about what comes out of your mouth. So we had a no profanity policy. I just feel like that's a discipline. and we need to control what comes out of our mouth. And I remember one guy saying, "Don't you think that's a little over the top?" And I said, "It's working. People love it. It's like this sanctuary that we've created." In fact, my son Christian one day said to me, "Dad, you've created an artificial environment. It's not the real world." And I said, "I know, and I love being there." So we had this group of people, that hundreds, maybe over 1,000 people, that were buying into uncommon standards, and it was great. And to this day, I'm still using a lot of those principles.
You've really lived your life with those principles, Mark.
Try.
Christian ethics, call it, what you will, but one of the things you recognized early on, and we've talked through the years, we've stayed in contact and stayed good friends. One of the things I really admire about you and Dottie and your family is your principles. And the fact that you recognize that, okay, these young men they all got the dream to be Aaron Judge or Otani or whoever the current superstars are. Those two guys come to mind, and certainly others. Everybody's got that dream, but there's a right and a wrong way, not only how to get there, but most people are never going to get there, but they're going to become a dad. They're going to become a member of a community. They're going to become a neighbor. They're going to become a member of a church or synagogue or mosque or whatever. And those life skills that you're teaching these young men permeate the sport of baseball and carry over into all those other aspects of life that they'll eventually be living. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit, about integrity and character. Why, in a world where we're not seeing that in a lot of cases, unfortunately, why is that so important?
First of all, when I'm talking to parents, because I do mentor these young kids, I have a consulting company now for them. I'm talking to the parents and saying things like, the end result is not what we're after. It's who are you becoming in the journey? What influences is this kid going to have? What are we going to teach him? Yes, we know what he wants to do. He wants to play at Texas. Okay, that's a great goal. We're going to set a plan in place to reach that goal. But who are you becoming in the journey? So what are some of the things that we can incorporate in this journey? It's like the carrot of playing at Texas. We've got their attention. That they're a teenager. They're not thinking about integrity. They're not thinking about commitment. They're not thinking about discipline. They're thinking about playing baseball on TV in Omaha. That's what they're thinking about. But as the adults, we start thinking, wait, we can really teach some great disciplines here. We can teach sacrifice. We can teach, you mentioned integrity. We can teach that you can reach the goal without compromising your character. I've had people, John, just say things like this to me. Can you just tell the college coach that my son throws 92 so he comes to watch him? I know if he comes and watches him, he'll like him. And I'll look at people and I'll go, but he throws 82. Are you really asking me to lie to a college coach so your son can get a look? I said, it doesn't work that way. So I get a firsthand look at how people think they need to act to get the carrot, and it's not true. It's a myth. You don't have to lie, cheat, steal. You can be really walk the straight and narrow and get there. And that's been what I've been doing with these kids for almost 20 years. I've helped almost 1,000 kids get to the next level. And I can tell you, we haven't cut corners and done anything other than take the high road. And so it works. I've proven that it works. And it's so important because those kids are being influenced. And then when baseball's over, as you mentioned, there's a lot more life after baseball, right? They're going to be a great employee. They're good because they learn to be on time. They learn body language matters. They learn what comes out of your mouth matters. They've learned work ethic. They learn how to make a good first impression because they shake somebody's hand with a firm handshake and look them in the eye. They learned all that when they were 14 trying to play at Texas. How cool is that? I love that. Yeah.
Exactly. And let's talk about some of those young men, and we don't have to get into specific names and all of that, but I went through your website yesterday and I was looking at some of the resumes of some of these guys, some of which are household words, more aren't, but you've had how many first rounders now in Major League Baseball?
I think about 6.
6, incredible. Yeah. And how many nuclear sub? At least one that I read about.
Chad Loonsman, he's traveling around the world on nuclear subs. Here's the reality. These kids, And I teach this all the time. If you're a competitor, and you're into sports, John, you know this. If you're a competitor, you compete everywhere. You don't just compete on the field. Chad was a 4.0 student. He competed everywhere. And these kids that I'm working with, they embrace the notion that they have a standard of excellence. Another thing they're learning in this process, to do everything to the best of your abilities, including the classroom. So some of them are having massive success and making it to the big leagues, which is great. But I promise you that there are others that are making it to the big leagues in other things. I got one kid, he's in special forces. In fact, when he was playing for me, I remember thinking this, if there was ever a kid that's going to be a elite soldier, this could be the kid. And sure enough, he is. So it's fun to see them applying these things in life after baseball.
And I think, once again, those life skills
Yeah.
that you're giving them
Yeah.
are the things that, once again, it may not be the sport. I think, not to get macabre for a minute, but I played judo with Jeremy Glick. And Jeremy was on the plane that went down not too far from your house there in Pennsylvania on 9/11.
Yeah. Yeah.
Learned in judo. I wasn't there at that moment, obviously, but he was. And his character, not to mention his physical skills, but his character came out that day, as did the other two guys that said, hey, you're not going to run this thing into the White House or 3 Mile Island or wherever they intended the target was. They saved a lot of lives because of the character that they learned in a sport.
Yeah. He made the ultimate sacrifice. They knew what was going to happen, but he was trained for that. Like, his life was about discipline. His life was about sacrifice. So who knows where that's going to manifest itself, John, but we know it's a good thing when kids have these kind of influences, and sports is a great place to teach them that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, so you started out, really, this was a business plan in a way for your two sons, and as they've obviously become adults. Talk about that a little bit, because you kind of had a life plan for them. I remember us talking about this probably 20 years ago when both boys were pretty young. And now it's manifested itself. But how did their involvement, not only as athletes, but coaches, administrators, how does all this morphed over the years?
It really didn't start as a business. My younger son, Christian, was 12, and he says to me one day, now I'm in central Pennsylvania, nobody would say this is a fertile feeding ground for SEC schools. And he says to me, Dad, I want to play in the SEC. I'm like, what? I don't know anybody that's ever played the SEC from our area. I'm a glass half full guy. So we put a plan together. So it was really started to help him. And then I started helping other kids. And then it grew and grew. And at the time, I had other businesses. And then what really happened was, they both graduated, moved on, and my wife looks at me and says, now what are you going to do? And I said, you know what? There's no reason for me to do anything different. I love this. And now I can kind of turn it into a business. It has to be a livelihood, but I love it. Why wouldn't I keep doing it? So that's what I did. I wrote a couple business plans and used my business background to think about this. I'm providing, first of all, I know you got a lot of business listeners. I always look at things like, what's the problem and what's the solution? And if I can be the one that creates solves the problem, the world of economics rewards you for that. The bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the paycheck. Jeff Roberti used to say that all the time. And there was a big problem in youth sports. And I took that problem on head on, and I'm still doing it. I'm still here. I'm 62. My wife's a teacher. She's going to retire in 5 years, but I have no intents of letting up, because it's so much fun. These young kids, they've got the world out in front of them, their dreams, and I get to work with them and their families. That's pretty cool.
What habits would you say people need to establish to become successful?
When I start with young kids, John, the thing that I want to do, I want them to build confidence. And the way I work with them to build confidence is we set little goals and we hit little goals. And we set a little bigger goal and we hit a little bigger goal. And I am convinced that when you do that over a period of time, you are teaching your subconscious that says, when I say I'm doing something, I do it. It works the opposite, though. And I train this for kids. I say, every time you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, You set a goal, you don't hit the goal, you are training your subconscious to not take you seriously. And I'm convinced if which one of those roads you choose will determine how much success you have in life, because we all know a lot of people that talk about all the things that they never did and they didn't reach their goals early on in life. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, their confidence isn't built, it's the opposite. So that's one of the first things. And then I would say the second thing right behind that is, what is the plan? Because I'm always talking to these kids about their dream, and it's not hard to get anybody talking about their dream. I'll tell you what's hard to get people to talk about: the plan to achieve the dream. I always say the dream is what you want. The plan or the goal is how you get what you want. And we don't have to go very far to hear everybody's dream. And the moment you say, how are you going to get that? You can hear pins drop. I'm good at helping these kids because they haven't done it. Their parents haven't done it. Let's put a plan together. Let's execute the plan. And let's make some adjustments along the way, because here's another one to answer your question: adversity. Adversity is coming. We don't have to sit around and wonder, are we going to get injured? Are we going to have disappointments? The answer is 100% yes. The question is, are we prepared for it? And will we turn that adversity into something even better? That's called embracing it. And these are some of the concepts I'm teaching these young kids and their parents, and they're loving it because, again, you apply it to so many other places in your life.
Sure. If there was one habit to break, Mark, what would it be?
Procrastination and sense of urgency. Most people just keep putting things off instead of doing it now. And they seem to think that there is no clock ticking. There's a clock ticking in everything we do. And I found out that the successful people always seem to have a sense of urgency, not panic. They're not running around with their head cut off. They just get it done. And so that would be my answer on that one.
Now, in your business, I mean, you're dealing with mostly local kids, or you dealing with national?
Now, John, I got a kid in Dubai that I'm working with. 12-year-old kid in Dubai, and I love this family. Dad is awesome, and this kid, give you an example how I work with kids over remotely. I said to him, I want to teach you some, remember, confidence. I said, can you juggle? He said, no. I said, can you jump rope? He said, no. I said, those are the first two things I want you to teach yourself. I'm not going to teach you. I want you to teach me. And I said, I'm going to talk to you in 3 weeks. I will find out a lot about you in 3 weeks. 3 weeks comes by and we have this meeting like we're having right now. And I don't even bring it up. I purposely don't bring it up because I want him to bring it up. And I wanted to see, maybe if he doesn't bring it up, what's that mean? He didn't do anything, right? So we get toward the end and he goes, Coach, do you want to see me juggle? And I go, can you? He jumps up, juggling away like crazy. And then he goes, do you want to see me jump rope? I go, can you? And he goes, he's doing all this stuff. I'm like, there you go. And his dad's just beaming. That's my boy.
Well, along those lines, how are you using technology? Obviously using Zoom for stuff like that, but how are you using technology now in this crazy age of AI and all the other stuff?
Yeah, I'm using some AI in some of our marketing and some of that stuff business wise. But with the kids, I'm just old school. There's nothing that fancy about juggling, setting a goal, jump roping. Honestly, there's some technological advances in baseball where you can really use some things to measure different metrics for these kids. But so much of this, John, is the personal, that interpersonal stuff going on and where the rubber meets the road kind of stuff. So I'm sure there's some people maybe more technologically advanced than me, but I'm keeping it fairly simple.
Well, it's funny because I go to the Dominican a lot with our business, and I see down there baseball is so important, such a part of the culture. So many players from Altuve and so many others have come from that market. But I'm thinking when they start out, some of these kids don't even have sneakers, and they wind up in the major leagues 10 years later.
I actually think some of all these things can be distractions. You got here in the US, kids got everything right at their fingertips. My son Christian played down in Cuba, and I got a picture of him here in my office of him handing a ball up to one of the kids because a baseball to those kids is like a gold bullion to you and me. And he came back and he said, Dad, it's just such a different perspective. We take everything for granted here.
Yeah, we sure do. We sure do. So let's talk now what you're doing. The ambassador group, that's a new concept. Explain what that is.
I decided to really get involved with these families at an intimate level. So I call it a career management coach. So I am helping the family, the player navigate what I call the journey. Like we're going through the journey. And I give them this example, John. This will help your listeners that maybe aren't familiar with consulting and baseball, but just picture this. If you've never been wilderness camping, and I said to you, hey, John, I just think it'd be a great idea. Go wilderness camping, go out in the Rockies, and I just want you to spend a couple of nights out there all by yourself. Most people would not want to do that. That'd be a little scary because they know there are grizzly bears, there's wolves, there's mudslides, there's rattlesnakes, there's bees, there's all kinds of stuff. They don't want to do that, right? But that is what a lot of people are doing in travel sports. They're going on this journey in this wilderness where they don't know all the perils. They don't know where all these problems are, and they are getting hurt by them. Whereas if you had a guide that said, hey, John, I want to take you wilderness camping. It's what I do for a living. I'm going to take you out there and don't worry about grizzly bears. I know where they are. I know where the rattlesnakes are. We're going to have a great time. I just want you to relax and enjoy the Rockies. Totally different feel. Why? Because you have somebody there guiding you. That's what I do for these families. I guide them through the wilderness, and that's what the ambassadors group is.
Great. Now I understand you're about to become a grandpa for the first time.
I am. My son Christian and his lovely wife Hannah just informed us that they're gonna have a baby boy. November 24th is the big day, so we're all excited about that.
With Thanksgiving, baby.
That's right.
I don't know Thanksgiving date this year, but that certainly could be.
Yeah, I already told Christian in baseball what we do with babies is we get their left hand and we get a baseball, we put it in their hand and then we tape it and we don't take it off until they look like a left-handed pitcher.
Let's have some fun, Mark. What would you say has been your greatest baseball watching experience? Is there a specific game you've been to or player achievement of a player, whether it's major league level, college level, one of your sons for that matter?
Boy, you're making me think back over about a 40-year career for a special event. I can think of a few. We had a bench clearing brawl, but we won't talk about that but when I get with my buddies, that's what they want to talk about. John, I've had so many seeing kids make it to the major leagues. I cry, I get chills because let's be real, every 10-year-old out there playing baseball dreams of playing on TV, and the vast majority of them will not. But when one of the kids that you coached when he was 12 years old is out there on the field as a big leaguer, something that obviously I wasn't able to accomplish, I just look at that and yeah, that's probably the highlight for me is just seeing these kids live their dream. I said to one of them one day, I said, do you ever just go out there? It was a shortstop. I said, do you ever go out there and just turn around and look up at the stadium, something I would have done, and just go, wow. And he goes, every single night. And I just love that answer. It's don't ever take that for granted. Yeah, that's probably it for me.
It's almost a renaissance of baseball right now. You know, my father was very involved with the sport at one time when he was young. And of course, he got mad at me because I wanted to be in other sports rather than baseball. And I refound my love of the game the last few years watching Aaron Judge, Jose Altuve, and Otani. Those three guys, and there's others, but those three guys, they're all old school too. They show up hurt. They show up, coach, put me in.
Yeah.
Your leg is hanging off the side of the bench, kid. Maybe I should put me in anyway. They're all old school players. What do you think now that today news today. I don't know if you saw it or not, about Pete Rose and also about Shoeless Joe Jackson, that the commissioners reinstated both of them for Hall of Fame eligibility.
It's bittersweet for me with Pete Rose because he deserved to experience that for so many years. I'm glad, but the thought that it's taken this long has just been brutal. He was one of those players I watched, and we all watched, and just thought that's how you play the game. So yeah, baseball really made him pay.
Yeah, they really did. And yeah, I enjoyed him so much. And even though I grew up a Yankees fan, but I watched the Mets a lot because my father was a Giants guy, farm team in Jersey City when he was growing up, and he knew Whitey Lockman and a guy named Willie Mays. Not sure what happened to him. He was playing minor league ball.
He did okay.
Of course, when the Giants in '59 went to San Francisco, the Mets were born 2 years later. So he was a Mets fan. So I grew up watching the Mets, of course. But yeah, so many great memories in the sport, and so many too. When I watch Field of Dreams, that movie becomes so personal. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
When the young when Kevin when oh boy, who's the
Kevin
actor?
Costner.
Kevin Costner. When Kevin
Yeah.
Costner's dad comes back,
Yeah.
that scene where he's got his catching gear on, he's a good-looking young man in his catcher's gear, and they play catch, and then he
Yeah.
says to his wife, "It's before the world beat the what out of him."
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's like, boy, any kid that ever played baseball, even if you played 1 year of Little League with your dad, boy, what a great scene that is. And so many other great baseball movies. But anyway, what's your favorite baseball movie? There's been so many.
There have been. Sandlot is right up there. The Rookie is crazy. I'll never forget that scene in The Rookie where he's done with baseball, but he still wishes he could do it. He throws a ball at the radar, and I can't remember the number, but it was a low number. And then it pops up, and it was wrong. It was like in the 90s. And he's like, wait, maybe I do still have it. And so he resurrects his career. So really cool.
Great movie. Yeah, and I forget the actor there, but he did a great job.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been so many. So Mark, just in wrapping up here, okay, we got listeners that are very diverse across the world. Some who have young aspiring ball players. How do they reach you? How do they get to your website? And if they want to, just get in touch with you and say, okay, my kid's 5. I love the game, and maybe he's gonna in a couple of years. What are the steps, and how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking. Honestly, these lessons that we're talking about are life skills. We're teaching these kids at very early ages. So if we have young parents out there, youth sports is a great place to teach them. TheAmbassadorsGroup.com is my website, TheAmbassadorsGroup.com. We're mostly focused on baseball. I would encourage your listeners that have young kids to let youth sports be a great training ground for all these life skills. But I will put an asterisk beside that because I'm speaking from experience. It works the opposite, unfortunately, too, where sometimes these youth sports opportunities start catering to kids and they get everything under the sun given to them. And if they're really good players, they get all kinds of exceptions made for them. And I want to caution people to not let youth sports become so important that you're actually creating the wrong habits, entitlement, arrogance, things like that. So I don't want to be negative, but we can do it right, but we can also do it wrong. And unfortunately, youth sports, there's some people out there doing it wrong too.
Ambassadorsgroup.com.
Yes, the Ambassadors Group. Yeah.
TheAmbassadorsGroup.com if they want to reach them. And folks, I can tell you, I've known Mark for over 30 years. You want a high character person to influence your son. Okay. Mark can be that guy. Still your job. He's not taking the place of mom or dad. Okay.
No.
But as a role model, he's done it with his own boys, and he's done it with so many others, including 6 that will put on major league uniforms tonight and take the field. So, the proof is in the pudding. If you want your kid to maybe have a shot to go the distance, it's a long shot. Okay. Thousands and thousands of players out there. Obviously, some make it to that level, but more importantly, developing those life skills that they're going to possess for all the other parts of life beyond sports. So, Mark, thank you for being you, my friend. Appreciate
My
it.
pleasure being here, John. Thank you for having me.
It's been an honor as always.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check back weekly for more exciting episodes. And don't miss Ink and Insight every Wednesday, where we celebrate iconic authors and dive into their impactful works.